Welcome back to International Crime Zone. Today we dive into a chilling case that shocked the United States in 2025, the brutal murder of a young transgender man, Sam Nordquist. Stay with us as we unravel the harrowing story of betrayal, violence, and a search for justice. The morning of March 14, 2025 began like any other in the quiet suburb of Portland, Oregon. Residents went about their routines, unaware that a horror story was about to unfold. It was a neighbor who first noticed something amiss. Sam Nordquist, a 28-year-old transgender man known for his kindness and community involvement, had failed to respond to repeated knocks and calls. Concerned, the neighbor called the police, fearing the worst. Little did anyone know, the scene awaiting the officers would etch itself into the city's darkest memories. Upon entering Sam's apartment, law enforcement officers were met with a scene of unimaginable brutality. The living room, usually tidy and welcoming, was overturned. Furniture lay smashed. Personal belongings scattered across the floor, and the smell of decay and chemicals hung in the air. Sam's body was discovered in the bedroom, bound and showing signs of prolonged torture. The officers immediately realized that this was no ordinary crime. It was calculated, cruel, and deeply personal. News of the murder spread like wildfire. Social media exploded with grief, anger, and confusion. Sam Nordquist was a beloved member of the LGBTQ+ community, and the nature of his death sparked debates, protests, and a sense of vulnerability across the nation. Community leaders condemned the violence, urging authorities to act swiftly. For many, this was not just a crime. It was a terrifying message that safety and identity were under threat. The autopsy report later revealed chilling details. Sam had suffered multiple injuries over hours, indicating he had been held captive and tortured before his death. Forensic experts described evidence of blunt force trauma, chemical burns, and signs of restraint. Each discovery deepened the horror and the urgency of the investigation. The question that haunted everyone was, who would commit such a heinous act and why? Investigators quickly identified multiple suspects connected to Sam's life. Friends, acquaintances, and former co-workers became subjects of intense scrutiny. Motives ranged from personal vendettas to prejudice and financial disputes. Each lead seemed to open more questions than answers, creating a web of suspicion that baffled law enforcement. The community watched anxiously as police pieced together the fragments of Sam's final hours. As night fell over Portland, the city felt a cold, uneasy silence. Residents locked their doors, unsure if someone so violent could strike again. Sam Nordquist's death was no longer a story confined to his apartment. It had become a symbol of fear, injustice, and the fragility of life. And yet, in the midst of grief, investigators felt a growing sense of determination. They were determined to uncover the truth, to bring the perpetrators to justice, and to ensure that Sam's voice, silenced too soon, would not be forgotten. In the days leading up to his death, Sam Nordquist had seemed like any other young adult navigating life in Portland. He went to work, spent time with friends, and engaged in his hobbies, from painting to attending local LGBTQ+ support meetings. Yet, behind his warm smile, there were subtle signs that something was amiss. Several friends later revealed that Sam had been receiving threatening messages on social media. The tone of these messages escalated over time, containing both personal attacks and alarming language that suggested someone had been watching him closely. One evening, just a week before his murder, Sam confided in his closest friend about a stranger he had noticed lurking near his apartment complex. The individual had never approached him directly, but the repeated presence made Sam uneasy. Friends recalled that he had become more cautious, double-checking locks and avoiding late-night outings. Even though he tried to maintain normalcy, the fear was tangible. It seemed as though someone was orchestrating his terror, testing his boundaries, and waiting for the right moment to strike. In addition to these unnerving incidents, investigators later discovered that Sam had been involved in a minor dispute at work. Though initially dismissed as trivial, The quarrel had escalated to veiled threats, leaving the victim anxious. Co-workers noted that Sam had begun taking extra precautions, such as parking closer to the building entrance and avoiding after-hour shifts. These details, seemingly mundane, became crucial pieces of the puzzle, revealing a pattern of intimidation and premeditation leading to the ultimate tragedy. Neighbors reported unusual activity around Sam's apartment in the days before his death. Strange cars would appear late at night and leave without clear purpose. Voices could be heard arguing, though no one would dare intervene. These reports, combined with the threatening messages and workplace tension, painted a picture of someone meticulously planning to invade Sam's life. The combination of digital threats and physical surveillance suggested that this was not a crime of impulse, but of obsession and malice. Family and friends tried to offer support, unaware of the gravity of the danger lurking in plain sight. Some noticed Sam growing more withdrawn, avoiding long conversations on the phone and carefully screening visitors. Despite these efforts, the perpetrator's reach seemed relentless. Investigators later uncovered digital footprints indicating that Sam's movements had been tracked and analyzed. Every outing, every encounter, every routine appeared to have been monitored, further emphasizing the calculated nature of the crime. By the final day, March 13, 2025, Sam's world had become a tense landscape of paranoia and caution. He continued his daily routines, trying not to alarm those around him, but the fear in his eyes betrayed the inner turmoil. This final day would be etched into history, as it marked the last moments of a young life brutally taken. Little did anyone know, the sequence of events that would follow over the next 24 hours would expose a dark and twisted narrative of hate, obsession, and multiple individuals involved in the torment that ended Sam Nordquist's life. The night of March 13, 2025, was unusually quiet in Sam Nordquist's neighborhood, a stark contrast to the violence that was about to occur. Surveillance footage from nearby street cameras later revealed shadows moving near his apartment in the hours before the murder. Multiple figures approached the building, their faces obscured by hoodies and masks. Investigators believe that the perpetrators had carefully planned the timing, waiting until most neighbors were asleep and no one would notice their approach. Every movement suggested premeditation. This was not a random act of violence, but a meticulously executed crime. Inside the apartment, Sam was confronted by more than one individual. Police reports indicated that he was restrained and subjected to horrific acts of torture. Forensic experts found evidence of chemical irritants, blunt force trauma, and prolonged physical restraint, indicating that the perpetrators had intended to inflict maximum suffering. The scene was horrifying. Personal items overturned, walls smeared with signs of struggle, and clear traces of violence that told a story of cruelty and obsession. Neighbors later described hearing muffled sounds that night, but no one could have imagined the scale of the horror unfolding behind closed doors. The 911 call that eventually brought police to the scene came from a concerned neighbor who noticed the absence of Sam's usual activity. When officers arrived, they were met with a scene of chaos and brutality unlike anything they had encountered in routine calls. Sam was already deceased, and the apartment held clear evidence of multiple perpetrators. The intensity of the violence led investigators to conclude that this was a personal attack, likely fueled by hatred or revenge, and not a random act of burglary. Every item in the apartment, from broken furniture to scattered personal effects, became evidence in the unfolding investigation. The initial investigation required meticulous work. Officers combed through the apartment, documenting every detail, photographing the crime scene, and collecting samples for forensic analysis. Fingerprints, footprints, and traces of DNA were carefully preserved, forming a complex puzzle. Detectives noted the presence of multiple DNA profiles, confirming early suspicions that more than one individual had been involved. This complexity suggested coordination and planning, pointing to a network of individuals who had collaborated to commit the act. In the days following the murder, Investigators worked tirelessly to trace the suspects. Digital evidence, including messages, social media activity, and GPS data, became crucial in identifying those with a motive. Detectives interviewed friends, family, and co-workers, piecing together a timeline of Sam's final hours. Each conversation revealed new layers of tension, fear, and secrecy. The web of relationships surrounding Sam became central to understanding who might have had both the opportunity and motive to commit such a heinous act. The city of Portland, meanwhile, was gripped by fear and outrage. Sam Nordquist's murder was not only a tragic loss but a reflection of the broader dangers faced by transgender individuals. Community leaders, activists, and citizens called for justice, pressing law enforcement to act swiftly and transparently. The case quickly drew national attention, highlighting issues of hate crimes, safety, and societal prejudice. As investigators delved deeper into the crime, one thing became clear. The story of Sam Nordquist was not just a case file. It was a rallying cry for justice, a chilling reminder of vulnerability, and the start of a long and complicated journey to uncover the truth. As the investigation into Sam Nordquist's murder progressed, law enforcement faced an increasingly complex web of leads. Detectives worked around the clock, examining every piece of evidence from the crime scene. Surveillance footage, social media interactions, and phone records all became crucial in tracing the movements of potential suspects. The presence of multiple perpetrators complicated matters, as investigators had to differentiate between individuals directly involved in the crime and those peripherally connected. Each discovery only deepened the sense of urgency and tension surrounding the case. Suspect profiling became central to the investigation. Behavioral analysts and criminal psychologists were brought in to study the nature of the attack. They noted the extreme cruelty of the assault, the use of restraints, and the premeditated stalking, concluding that the perpetrators were likely driven by a combination of personal animosity, prejudice, and a desire for control. Each suspect was evaluated for motive, opportunity, and psychological traits that matched the patterns observed in the crime. The investigation was meticulous, leaving no detail unchecked, as authorities sought to identify those capable of such calculated violence. Friends and family were interviewed repeatedly, often reliving the fear Sam had experienced in his final days. Former co-workers, neighbors, and acquaintances provided insight into possible conflicts and hidden animosities. Some described minor disputes or unusual behavior that seemed trivial at the time, but gained new significance in light of the murder. The investigators worked to map Sam's relationships, hoping to uncover a pattern of threat or harassment that would lead to the culprits. This process was emotionally taxing, forcing those closest to Sam to confront the reality of his suffering and the darkness surrounding his death. Community involvement intensified as well. Portland's residents, already shaken, organized vigils, protests, and online campaigns demanding justice. The media amplified the story, covering every development and highlighting the systemic issues of safety for transgender individuals. Public pressure on the police grew, and the authorities responded by releasing periodic updates to maintain transparency. While this engagement was vital for accountability, it also created additional stress for investigators, who had to balance thoroughness with the urgency demanded by an anxious public. As the days passed, law enforcement began narrowing their focus on key suspects. Digital forensics revealed suspicious communications and online activity, linking several individuals to Sam's final hours. Patterns emerged, suggesting coordination and shared intent among the perpetrators. These findings shocked both the authorities and the public, revealing that Sam's murder was not a spontaneous act, but a sinisterly orchestrated event involving multiple people working in concert. Each revelation fueled outrage and a desire for swift justice. Despite mounting pressure, investigators remained cautious. They knew that rushing the case could compromise critical evidence and lead to wrongful accusations. The team meticulously reconstructed timelines, analyzed forensic data, and cross-referenced alibis. With each passing day, the investigation drew closer to identifying the culprits, yet the tension remained palpable. For Sam Nordquist's loved ones, every new development was a reminder of the unimaginable cruelty he had endured. For the city of Portland, the case became a haunting symbol of vulnerability, resilience, and the urgent need for accountability. Weeks into the investigation, a breakthrough finally emerged that would change the course of the case. Forensic analysts identified a crucial piece of DNA evidence that matched a known offender in the criminal database. This discovery electrified the investigation, as it confirmed the involvement of at least one suspect with a documented history of violent behavior. Detectives quickly cross-referenced this individual's associates, uncovering connections to other persons of interest. The sense of progress, however, was tempered by the chilling realization that multiple perpetrators had collaborated in orchestrating Sam Nordquist's murder. Authorities began coordinating with federal agencies to track the suspect's movements. Surveillance footage, phone GPS data, and financial transactions were analyzed with painstaking care. Investigators discovered that some suspects had planned meetings, purchased materials consistent with restraints and chemical irritants, and surveilled Sam's apartment for days. The meticulous planning, now laid bare, stunned both law enforcement and the public. It was clear that this was a coordinated, cold-blooded attack carried out with extreme malice. Every step investigators uncovered added layers to the narrative of obsession and hate that had culminated in Sam's murder. The arrests themselves were dramatic and tense. Officers executed search warrants on multiple locations simultaneously, detaining individuals suspected of direct involvement in the crime. Each suspect exhibited a different reaction. Some remained stoically silent, while others displayed panic and aggression. Evidence collected from these raids, including weapons, personal items, and digital records, strengthened the case. Interrogations began immediately, revealing fragmented confessions and attempts to shift blame. These sessions provided investigators with critical insights into the planning, motives, and dynamics between the perpetrators, slowly piecing together the full story of the murder. Public reaction to the arrests was a mixture of relief and outrage. Many residents praised the swift action of law enforcement, while others were horrified by the disturbing details emerging about the suspects. News outlets reported on the violence, the premeditation, and the complicity of multiple individuals, generating nationwide attention. Advocacy groups for transgender rights demanded harsher penalties and systemic reforms, highlighting the broader societal issues underscored by the crime. Sam Nordquist's death, while intensely personal, had ignited a national conversation about safety, justice, and intolerance. As investigators delved deeper into the suspects' backgrounds, disturbing patterns emerged. Several individuals had previous records of harassment, assault, or bias-motivated behavior. Some were acquainted with Sam, while others had no direct connection beyond shared prejudices or opportunistic motives. Analysts began reconstructing a timeline of the conspiracy, revealing how each person contributed to the orchestration of Sam's torture and murder. The complexity of the case emphasized the sheer audacity and calculated cruelty behind the crime, leaving law enforcement and the community both horrified and determined to see justice served. Despite these breakthroughs, questions remained unanswered. Detectives continued pursuing additional leads, seeking to uncover every detail about the planning, execution, and potential accomplices. The investigation was far from over, and the narrative of Sam Nordquist's murder was still unfolding. For his friends and family, the arrests offered a semblance of hope, yet they also reminded them of the horror Sam had endured and the lives forever altered by his tragic death. The city of Portland braced itself for the complex legal battles and emotional aftermath that lay ahead. Once the suspects were in custody, the investigation entered a new, intense phase. Interrogations began under strict protocols, with detectives carefully separating individuals to prevent collusion. The atmosphere inside the interrogation rooms was tense and charged. with each suspect exhibiting varying degrees of fear, defiance, or manipulation. Investigators focused on uncovering not only the identities of those directly involved in Sam Nordquist's murder, but also the underlying motives that had driven such extreme acts of cruelty. Every word, gesture, and hesitation was meticulously recorded for later analysis. Through painstaking interviews, detectives began piecing together a chilling narrative. One suspect admitted to participating in surveillance, monitoring Sam's routines and coordinating logistics for the attack. Another revealed that personal animosity and long-standing prejudice against Sam had fueled their actions. Yet another individual admitted they had been motivated by peer pressure and the twisted desire to be part of a group plan, underscoring the disturbing social dynamics that had enabled the crime. These confessions, fragmented as they were, exposed a network of hatred, obsession, and reckless collaboration that ultimately led to Sam's death. The motives behind the murder were complex and horrifying. Financial disputes, personal grudges, and deep-seated prejudice interwove, forming a tapestry of malice. Detectives learned that some suspects had a history of targeting LGBTQ+ individuals, revealing patterns of bias-driven aggression. Others were driven by opportunistic impulses, emboldened by group dynamics and the anonymity afforded by digital communication. This combination of personal vendetta, hate, and coordinated planning made the crime particularly disturbing and highlighted the vulnerabilities that marginalized communities often face. Investigators also uncovered attempts to cover up the crime. Suspects admitted to cleaning the scene, disposing of potential evidence, and spreading misinformation to mislead police. Despite these efforts, forensic analysis had preserved the truth. DNA, chemical residues, and digital footprints painted an indisputable picture of the events leading to Sam's murder. Each revelation deepened the understanding of how methodically the perpetrators had executed the crime and illustrated the terrifying lengths they were willing to go to avoid accountability. Family and community members followed the interrogation developments closely, experiencing a mix of relief and anguish. Learning the truth about the motives and planning behind Sam's death was both validating and horrifying. For many, it underscored the dangers faced by vulnerable individuals and the importance of vigilance, community solidarity, and systemic protections. Activists and local authorities began advocating more strongly for preventive measures and educational campaigns to combat bias and ensure safety, using the case as a powerful, albeit tragic, example. By the end of this intense interrogation phase, investigators had a clearer understanding of the crime's architecture. They knew who had been involved, how the attack was planned, and what had motivated each participant. While the legal process was just beginning, these revelations provided a foundation for justice and accountability. The story of Sam Nordquist, though tragic, was no longer shrouded in mystery. It was a narrative of calculated violence, social complicity, and the urgent need for societal reflection and change. Following the arrests and confessions, the case against the suspects moved into the pre-trial phase. Prosecutors meticulously built their case, compiling forensic evidence, digital communications, eyewitness accounts, and the suspects' own statements. The complexity of multiple perpetrators, each with distinct motives and roles, made the preparation painstaking. Legal teams had to ensure that every detail was corroborated, as any weakness could allow the defendants to evade accountability. Each day brought new layers of tension, both for investigators and for Sam Nordquist's grieving family. Court filings revealed the chilling details of the murder. The prosecution described the premeditated nature of the crime, the extreme violence inflicted upon Sam, and the coordination among multiple suspects. Public interest soared, as local and national media covered every development. The defense, meanwhile, attempted to challenge the evidence, arguing over interpretations of forensic findings and questioning the credibility of witness testimonies. The courtroom became a battlefield of narratives, each side attempting to frame the story in a way that would favor their cause, while the truth of Sam's suffering remained at the core. Community reactions intensified as news of the pretrial developments spread. Vigils and rallies were held in Portland, with hundreds demanding justice and highlighting the vulnerability of transgender individuals in society. Activists and advocacy groups used the case as a platform to push for hate crime legislation and better protections, emphasizing that the murder was not an isolated incident but part of a broader societal problem. Social media campaigns amplified the message, with hashtags supporting Sam and calling for accountability trending nationwide. The city, still grappling with shock, rallied together in solidarity. Meanwhile, family members of Sam Nordquist faced a whirlwind of emotions. Grief, anger, and a desire for closure were compounded by the slow pace of legal proceedings. Every court date reminded them of the brutality Sam had endured, while also offering hope that justice might finally be achieved. Friends and supporters created online memorials, shared Sam's story widely, and advocated for reforms to prevent similar tragedies. This outpouring of support became a source of strength for the family, providing both emotional relief and a platform to honor Sam's memory. Investigators continued to provide updates to the public, carefully balancing transparency with the need to protect the integrity of the ongoing case. Each revelation of new evidence, arrest, or procedural development reinforced the narrative of a meticulously planned and executed murder. Legal experts explained the complexities of prosecuting multiple suspects with overlapping roles, noting that each person could face different charges based on their specific actions and intent. The case became a nationwide lesson in both the capabilities of modern investigative techniques and the challenges of ensuring justice for marginalized victims. As the trial approached, anticipation and tension reached a fever pitch. Portland remained on edge, knowing that the court would soon provide a platform for the full story to unfold. The community's collective attention reflected the gravity of the case, not just a tragic murder, but a moment of reckoning about hate, violence, and accountability. Families, activists, and ordinary citizens waited with bated breath, hoping that the legal system would provide closure, punishment for the guilty, and a broader message about the consequences of prejudice and cruelty. Sam Nordquist's story had transformed from a personal tragedy into a symbol of the fight for justice and recognition of the vulnerabilities faced by transgender individuals. When the trial finally commenced, the courtroom was filled with tension, grief, and anticipation. Families of the victim, the public, and media representatives packed the seats, eager to witness the pursuit of justice for Sam Nordquist. Prosecutors opened with a harrowing account of the events, detailing the premeditation, the physical and emotional torment, and the involvement of multiple perpetrators. Their narrative painted a vivid picture of cruelty, shocking those present and setting the tone for what would become a highly emotional trial. Witnesses took the stand, recounting fragments of Sam's final days with trembling voices. Friends described the subtle warning signs they had noticed, his growing anxiety, the threatening messages, and the ominous presence of strangers near his apartment. Neighbors testified to strange occurrences and suspicious behavior observed in the days leading up to the murder. Each testimony added depth to the narrative, slowly reconstructing the chilling reality of Sam's last moments. For many, hearing the stories aloud made the tragedy feel even more immediate and personal. Forensic experts provided detailed explanations of the evidence collected from the crime scene. Photos, chemical residue reports, DNA analysis, and digital traces were presented, each piece reinforcing the prosecution's argument of premeditation and coordinated execution. The meticulous explanation of each finding emphasized the brutality and the calculated nature of the murder. The courtroom audience watched in silent horror as the layers of planning, malice, and collaboration among the suspects became unmistakably clear. One of the most emotional moments came when a close friend of Sam's described his personality, his dreams, and the life that had been stolen. They spoke of Sam's resilience, his kindness, and the love he shared with those around him. Tears flowed in the courtroom, and even some of the jurors appeared visibly affected. This testimony humanized the victim in a way that statistics and forensic reports could not, reminding everyone present that behind the headlines and evidence was a young man whose life had been brutally cut short. The defense attempted to undermine credibility, questioning the accuracy of witness accounts and highlighting inconsistencies in statements. They argued that some of the suspects had been coerced into confession or influenced by group dynamics. However, the prosecution countered with irrefutable forensic evidence and corroborated testimonies, demonstrating a pattern of organized violence. The tension between defense and prosecution created a courtroom drama that kept everyone on edge, with each day bringing new revelations and emotional confrontations. As the trial progressed, the full scope of the crime began to emerge. The jury learned not only about the actions of each suspect but also about the motives behind the murder: hate, personal grudges, and a cruel desire to exert control over Sam's life. The trial transformed into a broader narrative about societal prejudice, the vulnerabilities of marginalized communities, and the importance of justice. For the public, each testimony reinforced the need for vigilance, empathy, and systemic protections, while for Sam's family, the courtroom became a battleground for truth, closure, and remembrance of a young life tragically stolen. The moment of truth arrived as the jury returned to the courtroom, faces solemn and unreadable. The judge called the session to order, and all eyes were fixed on the jurors. When the foreperson finally spoke, the words echoed through the chamber. The suspects were found guilty on multiple counts, including first-degree murder, conspiracy, and hate crime enhancements. Relief, shock, and emotion swept over those present. Sam Nordquist's family, despite tears and trembling hands, felt a profound sense of validation. The painstaking evidence, the relentless pursuit of truth, and the voices of witnesses had all led to justice. For the accused, the verdict marked the culmination of a meticulously orchestrated legal battle. Some displayed disbelief, others bowed their heads in silent acknowledgement of the inevitable. The courtroom atmosphere was heavy with the weight of consequences, a stark reminder that premeditated cruelty carries accountability. Legal analysts emphasized the significance of hate crime convictions in setting precedents, sending a strong societal message that targeted violence and prejudice would not go unpunished. Outside the courthouse, the community expressed a mixture of relief and solemn reflection. Vigils and gatherings shifted from protest to remembrance, honoring Sam's life and acknowledging the courage of his family in seeking justice. Activists reaffirmed their commitment to education, advocacy, and systemic reforms to protect transgender individuals and other marginalized communities. Sam Nordquist's story became a rallying point, a powerful testament to resilience, awareness, and the enduring pursuit of justice in the face of senseless violence. The family released a statement expressing gratitude for the support they had received and highlighting the importance of continued vigilance against hate and violence. They spoke of Sam's kindness, humor, and the dreams he had for the future, urging society to honor his memory by fostering empathy, understanding, and inclusivity. Their words resonated deeply, reminding everyone that while justice was served, the loss of Sam Nordquist remained a profound tragedy. For viewers following the case, the verdict provided closure, but also a sobering reminder of the realities faced by marginalized individuals. The story highlighted the intersection of prejudice, obsession, and violence, emphasizing the importance of awareness, community engagement, and the role of law enforcement in protecting vulnerable populations. Sam's life, though cut tragically short, became a symbol of courage, the pursuit of justice, and the enduring impact one person can have on society, even in the face of hate. Thank you for watching this episode of International Crime Zone. Sam Nordquist's story is one of tragedy, courage, and the relentless pursuit of justice. If you want to stay informed about true crime cases, Remember to subscribe and hit the notification bell. Comment below your thoughts on this case and let's honor Sam's memory together. Until next time, stay safe, stay aware, and never stop seeking the truth.